If you enjoy the channel and would like to support us, you can do so by heading over to our online store where we work with our graphic designer to create eye-catching designs that depict your favourite aircraft from World War II, fighters, helicopters and transport. You can pick the design you like and tailor it to clothing, stationery, phone covers, coasters and much more. You can head over to our website at aircrewinterview.tv and click store, or go to redbubble.com/people/AC interview. Thank you and enjoy. So Eskil, when did you first become interested in aviation?
So I think as a young boy I started flying model airplanes. Must have been around 11 or 12 years old. And not long after that, my cousin, who had joined the Air Force in Norway, he was on his way from the south part of Norway to the north with a Bell UH-1B, and he landed that in our garden, basically.
As you do.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, so it was a big garden. Right. But I was blown away by this helicopter and the awesomeness of it all. So I think that was a major part of my aviation interest, and it just went on from there. Really, I decided to crack on with my duty at school and take some STEM subjects, and I kept on flying model airplanes throughout. And so that was the beginning for me.
Great. So what year did you actually join the Air Force?
So I based on a recommendation from my cousin who landed that helicopter, he recommended that I should spend some time in the military before applying for pilot training, because you only get one chance, so I was actually a recon soldier in the army for 1 year.
Oh wow! Okay.
Airborne recon soldier before I started flying. So I started in '92, and the year after, or throughout that year, I did some selection tests, and I was lucky to get through, and started on the piloting side of it in '93. 94.
Brilliant. So can you talk us through some of the aircraft you started training on?
Yeah, so the basic trainer, the screening aircraft in Norway, is a shoulder wing sub aircraft that we had since 1986, I think, in Norway. It's as aerodynamic as a milk jug, but it is a good trainer. It's a side-by-side with a Lycoming engine and aerobatic, and it's called Sub Safari. It's a MFI 15 or T-17. It's also used by the Danish Air Force. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a good trainer at the time. So, and that's just, I flew 40 hours on it, more or less, and then I went on to do a year in the academy in Trondheim, and then it's the big old Texas waiting for you then. But no, so we went to Texas to do our Euro joint jet pilot training over there in '95.
And how long did this take? Like before you went onto your frontline aircraft?
Yeah, so the process is fairly streamlined. There's like 360 days of flying in Texas because of the weather. So it's like a machine producing pilots, and but for each individual, it's amazing to come there, and it's you spend about 6 months on the T-37, the Tweet, the only aircraft in U.S. military inventory that's louder and idle than it is at mil power. But it was a wonderful aircraft in itself, and then another 5-6 months on the T-38.
Mm-hmm.
After that, so then you get your wings, and then I stayed on, Norway stayed on to do the IFF, as an introduction to fighter fundamentals, a bit of light introduction to air-to-air combat, and also a little bit of air-to-ground, and then that's only 2-3 months, and then you go to your assigned aircraft, it was pretty easy in Norway. We only had F-16s, so that's what we went on to.
And it's normal for European air forces to go over to Texas to do the training?
Yeah, more or less. It's a Euro-NATO joint jet pilot training, NJIPT, Shepherd Air Force Base. I think they started in 1979 or something like that.
Right.
So it's been on there for a long time, and certainly Norwegian, Danes, Germans, Dutch. You have, a majority of the NATO countries running through there. Some Brits, but mainly they do their own thing, right, in the valley and etc. So, but it's fairly common, and it's an easy thing for smaller air forces to do because you just pay the ticket and go, because we don't have the capacity to train ourselves. And it's also a huge benefit because whenever you go on exercises or conflicts together, you find old friends that you flew with, and then it's easier to pick up the thread and then working together like that. So it's a brilliant concept.
And what was it like training in America? Like, how did you get on with your counterparts, your American counterparts?
Yeah, no, it's for me, being grew up on a farm in Little Norway. Coming to the huge Texas, everything is ginormous, and it's anything from the burgers to the cars, and it was just mind blowing. But it was amazing. I was so happy to be there, and fortunate to be able to fly fast jets over there as a 22-year-old and
living the dream.
Yeah. It was hard work. Very often 18-hour days, but you work hard, you play hard, and fly even faster. So it was a great time, and but obviously a culture shock every day.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So what was the T-38 like to fly?
I mean, there's a rocket ship coming from the T-37.
It's like rocket, I've heard people call it.
Yeah, it is. It's a very slick airplane, very thin wing, and coming from the T-38, which is like a straight wing, a bit more docile, and so it was a mind-blowing thing. And also the fact that now your instructor is behind you. You sit next to nobody. Now it's just a voice. I can't point out and point on instruments or visual references. It's all now by a voice. So you felt a bit more alone, but at the same time you had to grow with the task and get used to it. So. But it happened twice as fast as the T-37.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody overspeed the gear on takeoff, and because it's just rocketing away.
Yeah.
It's an amazing airplane with an incredible roll rate. And, every solo student going out and do full aileron rolls, and just hysterically laughing out of a bit of fright and joy. But it was, I got to fly later on in the test pilot school, and I still loved it then, as I did before. And but it's, it's had a few accidents because it's certainly in the final turn, and if you don't fly it right and quite precise, it can have you. So
I've heard that a few times as well.
Yeah, so it is. Most airplanes that don't have a few vices there, they tend to be really good trainers, and I guess that's part of it too.
So did you enjoy your time in America in this training stage?
Yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic. Anything from, I grew up on a farm, right, with big engines and tractors, and so having then a Firebird with a big V8 engine, and not being ruined by the petrol bill too and everything, and flying the jets, and it just got better and better. I was the first Norwegian to fly the F-16 training with the Air National Guard in Tucson.
Wow.
So I joined a Dutch class to kind of evaluate the program, and we ended up doing that, and we'd done that until like last 2 years. Last year, I think, we flew with the Air National Guard. Same thing, because we run out of capacity to train ourselves. But it's a brilliant training program over there, and being there for 8 months, flying the F-16 sort of 3 times a day. No, I mean a weekend, and riding my Harley back and forth to work. It was just amazing.
It's not bad, is it?
No, it's all right. Yeah.
So Eskil, what was your first thoughts on the F-16?
First thought, I was almost gonna fall off, because it's, you sit almost on top of the airplane. It's an amazing cockpit, probably one of the best ever built still, and the view is just mind blowing. It's like a 3-dimensional race bike. So obviously incredibly powerful, coming from the T-38 onto the F-16. It was just equally as a dramatic step up from the tweak to the T-38 to then the F-16. It's incredible.
So can you talk us through some of your ground training on the F-16?
So it's very much based as any other American aircraft, based on the -1 and the different chapters in the manuals. So we recognize that straight away. So there's obviously a lot of grown-up training to be done by yourself, a lot of studying, and then the training in the States was then follow the same pattern that you had ground training, all the systems, and then you started doing simulators, basic introduction, basic flying, and then you start blending in both instruments and also at the same time emergency training. So that covers about 2 months, I think, before you start flying the airplane.
What was the simulator like at the time when you went through that training? Was it like up to date like it is now?
No, it wasn't quite as good. They also had different levels of sim, right? Some of them were almost like only night flying because of the lack of visual capacity on the projectors and everything. So it's like a night flight. But then eventually, over some time, they had others too that were a lot better. But it's only like 120-degree visual field, maybe. It's not like a dome as that came later, of course. But I did my training in 97, 98, and they got better and better after that.
So I want to talk about your first flight in the F-16. What was it like plugging that reheat or afterburner for the first time? Yeah,
I think the first takeoff was in middle power, because I think I think the instructors knew that it was just going to be mind-blowing enough, but it was a clean aircraft. It's a 2-seater clean aircraft, so it was just incredible in itself. I think it was flight 3 you're allowed to do afterburner takeoff, but you had to lift the nose up to 25 degrees, 30 degrees nose high, otherwise you always split the gear before even it takes 7 seconds to get the gear up in F-16 plus or minus, but you have to be quick, otherwise you'll bust the 300 knots limit. So it's incredible.
Even without the afterburner, could you tell the power difference compared to the T-38, for instance?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got 14,000 pounds approximately of thrust, and the aircraft is maybe low 20s. So already you have lots of thrust going, even without the afterburner. So, and also down in Tucson, we used to fly clean jets a lot of the time.
Right.
Which obviously changed with the role of the F-16 later on. You rarely flew clean jets unless you're in test flights.
So what was the role of the F-16 with the Norwegian Air Force?
So initially it was an air defense fighter, right? Intercept to take over the role from the starfighter, basically to guard the north against the Russians. And so Norway only had heat-seeking missiles, AIM-9 Limas in the beginning. It wasn't until like late 90s that we got the AMRAAM, and in 2000 we got the midlife upgrade program in the rest of the EPAF countries, which transforms the airplane. And then you got the introduction with laser-guided bombs and everything. So then the whole role changed a little bit became very popular, the multi-role role. And so then we started training a lot more into air-to-ground, and also the cooperation with the special forces and forward air controllers on the ground. So this all changed with the conflicts on the Balkan and everything. So we just had to go with the flow, really. And the F-16 was just a perfect airplane for doing both. You could just jettison the bombs and you're a full-up 9G fighter, which is incredible. And between, hands-on throttle and stick, HOTAS stuff, it was just right there. It was so intuitive, and still some of the best ones around, I think.
So can you talk us through some of your flying training on the F-16?
Yeah, so it's the time in Tucson is very much fairly basic. We did up to 2v2 training there, some air to ground, and they have some fantastic ranges and very experienced instructors. So the basic training was second to none, fantastic. And then, but what you don't get is the dynamic weather and snow and ice and all that stuff as you get in Norway. So you come home and then they do a transition program for about half a year or so.
Okay.
Obviously, then we had the drag shoot on the Norwegian F-16s, and you'd be flying around in the winter. You had to de-ice the aircraft sometimes, and which was huge contrast to Tucson. And you rarely flew an instrument approach, only because you had to, and it was on the program. But in Norway, this was pretty much a standard stuff, and having really short days. You were often in the dark, especially up north.
Oh yeah. So was the F-16 suited for the Norwegian climate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our engineers were brilliant and they learned very quickly to work with the airplane. But it's been served, the Norwegian Air Force very well. We had a few lost due to. It's a single engine, if you ingest of 10-pound seagull, it is difficult for the engine to handle. So we lost a few, but overall I think it was very well suited to the role, both Mach 2 airplane, for intercepts and everything, and also then to adapt into the swing role. It did very well.
And did you ever reach Mach 2 in the F-16?
I did, yeah.
Oh wow!
Yeah, 2.02, and it was a 2.05 limit.
Wow!
So it was obviously a goal on that day to do it. I had to do a ferry flight from Trondheim down to Rygge Air Base, and I managed to do it. Listening to some of the pilots, well, how do you make the most of it, and just porpoise just underneath the tropopause, and I got there in the end. Almost ran out of fuel, so it was close to calling me in fuel in the end, which wasn't part of the plan at all. But
wow.
The fuel flow is astonishing.
Were you in full burner at this point?
Yeah. So it's you're looking at 60,000 pounds an hour. That's
a lot, isn't
it? It's a bucket of 10-litre fuel per second, to be shuffling through. So, yeah, but I did it.
You did it, yeah. You can tick that box.
Yeah.
So one of our favourite chats on this channel is DACT. Like, how did the F-16 fare against the F-15s, the F-18s, everything else? How did it fare?
It could very much hold its own against anything. 9G aircraft, agile. One of the big things is the visibility. So a few others have, like this one here, it's got a canopy bow and everything, and it's harder to keep sight. 9G helps. Powerful engine, But you know, like anything, it's also about the pilot and the environment and your game plan and everything. But we had some brilliant training in the States, and I think I'll still pick the F-16 any day. Obviously, when you get high, above 25,000 feet, some of the bigger airplanes like the F-15 had more lift and 2 engines. So then you tend to want to drag the fight down low, because then you know, so much excess power. Even in 9G, you'd be accelerating in 9G. And also when you're fighting an F-18, you had to be aware of that initial move on the F-18, you know, pulling 70 plus angle of attack, which could scare you because he'd be pointing at you. But at the same time, if you had a little bit of patience, he would then be completely out of energy, and a minute later you'd be, you know, in guns position. Yeah, no, it's a fantastic airplane.
And I think it was. I think all the European F-16s have the Pratt & Whitney engine, don't they? What was that like compared to the GE?
Well, I flew the GE once on the Big Mouth Block 30 in the States, and they, you know, they obviously got more power, but at the same time, all the different aircraft have different blocks, and they had different weights. So you got a big engine, but then the airframe was also heavier. So I think the Block 10 and Block 15 that Norway had with the MLU upgrade and the 220E engine was a brilliant combination. I think the GE engines were really good. Mm-hmm. So, but that, you know, the Pratt & Whitney was performing really well for us.
So what were the strengths, or are the strengths and weaknesses of the F-16?
Yeah, it's a bit, you touched on, you know, the visibility is astounding, and at the moment, you know, still there's no airplane that has the same, you know, visibility, which helps. I think the cockpit was incredibly well built. In the beginning the stick didn't move, but, you know, shortly thereafter, you know, it was, and it moved a few centimeters, but not much. But, you know, it's very intuitive. After, you know, the first few minutes, you know, you fell in love with the side stick, and that freed up space in the cockpit to use as screens, and it's a tiny cockpit, so you need that space to work with it. And obviously a 9G airplane with the visibility and the ability to swing between the different roles, and it was incredible. Also, you know, hard to spot, you know, visually.
Oh, yes.
In fights. It's a kind of tiny aircraft, especially head on. Didn't smoke much or anything, so that was also an advantage when you know, fighting bigger airplanes like, you know, MiG-29s or flankers, or, you know, they're bigger, they're easier to spot, and they smoke. But then on the other side, you know, it was a smaller aircraft. It couldn't maybe carry as much as some of the other airplanes. Range was okay, I guess, when you put the tanks on, but then you increase the radar cross section and everything. But and, you know, someone's always going to argue the single engine issue, but yes. But more and more so, and we've proven with the latest 5th gen fighter that you know, the single engine is actually just as good, more or less, as a 2-engine aircraft. So it's not an argument anymore, really.
Exactly. Yeah. So what kind of weapons could the Norwegians carry on the F-16s?
Yes, we had 9 Limas initially, and then we got the AMRAAM, which is a huge upgrade also from a philosophy point of view, BVR, and then in the beginning the radar wasn't really coping. It was almost like the limiting factor. But we got the MLU upgrade, and there was a different ball game. So air-to-air wise, that, you know, became really good, and eventually, you know, we got the IRIS-T, the helmet-mounted sight as well on the M3 upgrade program, which was incredible. because like the F-18 having 70 degrees of alpha, you can turn around and look at you and come within the zone of a forward firing missile, but you never get there in the F-16 with less than half of the alpha available. But suddenly you have this off-bore sight missile, and you can play the same game as they did. So that was incredible. And then we started with 500 pound and 2,000 bomb laser guided, and eventually GPS bombs, and so it could pretty much carry anything, and largely based on the fact that the US Air Force or the partnering forces were all joining in together for the qualification and the certification of all these different weapons. So if you wanted to, there was a lot that you could get that would just bolt on the airplane and start flying with it.
And did you ever fly on any large exercises, and did you work with any of the European F-16 operators?
Yeah, so we did that. I mean, we did that on a regular basis,
Okay, right.
I went to two red flags in the F-16.
Oh, wow.
And that was obviously an amazing thing to do. The last one was in 2007, and I went straight from there to test pilot school. But yeah, I was a ferry flight commander, so leading 10 F-16s and 4 tankers, and it was direct flight from Bodø to Las Vegas.
But you had a sore bum after that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so yeah, that was airborne time was 11.5 hours, I think, and then but you sit quite some time, an hour and a half maybe in the airplane before you even take off, and then so that was a long day, but fantastic to do. Yeah.
And how did the Americans see the European F-16 operators compared to theirs? Did they respect, or was it similar training? How did you work?
Yeah, so same again as you touched on earlier, that when you went through the NGIP program in Texas, suddenly you run into people you haven't seen for some time, and you instantly back to where you were, and it's so much easier than then run into the planning phase of it, and plan together, and there's always this mutual respect, and some nations have more aircraft and resources available for train differently, different weapons and everything, but largely within NATO you had you had the security clearance as a standard, so then you can all talk openly about what you can do and everything, and put it all together. So no, that was always a mutual respect, and also for us coming over there, it'd be fascinating to see all the different platforms that we weren't used to in Europe, and flying the B-52s and F-117s, and
cool,
so it was amazing to be a part of such a thing. It's often 80 versus 20, on a big flight.
And you also flew the F-16 in the demo role. Can you tell us about this and how it came about?
Yeah, so the centennial celebration of flight in Norway, both civilian and military, was in 2012, and already in 2010 I started working towards this, because I knew that this is significant, and our demo role has been dormant for some years due to the cost, and also, as we talked about, you're changing the role of the airplane, so it's a significant undertaking then to change the configuration from having racks and bombs and tanks and everything on the airplane, and to make it clean for training, and modify it back. So my argument was that I can utilize the fact that I fly clean airplanes as a test pilot a lot, and then if there's any spare fuel and time, I could then train towards this, and the celebration program manager, to call it that, he was very keen on the idea, and so then I picked up an old program from before, and then modified it slightly, and then started training, and yeah, I think did north of 70 displays, in practice, and also shows during that year in 2012. So it was incredible, and what a machine to do it in.
Oh yeah, a clean F-16,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that livery is amazing. The few photos you sent me, it looks awesome, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was good. I always loved the polished airplanes, but obviously we couldn't polish the F-16, but we painted it underneath like it was polished aluminium, and then we did the flag on the top, which was a great idea from the project lady, so it was a good compromise, and it was great.
And did you have a favourite manoeuvre for your display?
So I think a really cool maneuver is the Max Alpha roll,
Yes.
and also the Max Alpha flyby. We managed to get the airplane back to about 107, 108 knots, and that requires about 82% power in a level flight. But you're full aft 625 degrees angle of attack, and but you could just power yourself out of it, and it will just continue climbing at 25 degrees nose high and beyond. So, but yeah, the Alpha roll is quite cool.
So Eskil, do you have any memorable stories you can share with our viewers about flying the F-16? I'm sure you have many, but maybe a few.
Yeah. There's tons of moments, but some of them you also forget. But I remember I was doing a huge exercise in Norway, and we were flying with some German Tornadoes. It was obviously the opposing forces, and we're trying to chase down. It was a two-ship of F-16s trying to chase down these German Tornadoes up in the northwest of Lofoten. And they were clear down to 200 feet, and maybe even lower for that matter. But I remember, the weather was coming down, and we were lower, and we ended up about 500 feet or so.
Oh.
And looking at the radar, and I looked, and we were doing almost 600 knots, trying to catch them up, and we saw
600 knots.
You see an opening velocity of over 200 knots. So we just, came out of burner and just turned back home. It's like there. So they were fast and low and fast. It was just insane. But we were never going to catch them at all. But yeah, there's tons of stories. But that was an amazing moment as such. But where do I start?
Exactly, yeah. But I also want to talk about your exchange. You flew the Tornado F3 with the RAF. Can you tell us about how this came about and what it was like to fly?
Yeah, so it was on recommendation from a friend of mine, a Dutch guy, and Face, and he had done one in as part of the Dutch exchange program, and they had that still going, and they said that it's coming up, and for me it was to see a different Air Force, how they operate, but also the opportunity to go on operations like Southern Watch and Falklands, and because at the time, just on Allied Force, and I was keen to learn more, and I was originally supposed to fly the GR7, but
the Harrier.
Yeah. So
right.
then, initially that was the plan, but it was Joint Force 2000, and was issued with manning and training and etc. So then they offered us the F3 instead, and it turned out to be a great time. Coming from the F-16 to the F3 was a bit of a bummer, but in terms of it was old, big, difficult cockpit, not intuitive at all, and and then you have to learn working with another crewmate and everything. But in the end, when you look at it from a bigger picture, it was a fantastic time. I learned a lot. It was always going to be with me, and But you know, there was a lot to do, so you had to have crew members because it was busy just flying the thing with all the limitations, both on the wings and the G and the speed, and even the slats or maneuvers, as you call it, have to be manually put up and down. And the wings are manually adjusted as opposed to the side of the aircraft, for example. And then the radar is also a lot of manual labor in the back, you know, transfer to poles and, you know, all that stuff. So it was a proper two-crew cockpit.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find coming from the F-16? What did the F-3 do well and not so well compared to the F-16?
So it had a more powerful radar, bigger nose, more powerful, bigger pickup range. It could loiter quite well when you put the wings forward and quite slow. And it obviously very fast down low. Had the same max airspeed of 800 knots. But I mean, you know, this one flew like a Mercedes 500 SL. You just go cruise on autobahn. But you know, if you did 800 knots in the F-16, it was a rough ride. It was it's like a Golf GTI compared to the Mercedes. You know, it's a bit you know, rattly. Mm-hmm. You'd still do it, but yeah, a bit different. But it's amazing for me to then fly a different airplane and use it operationally as such. I love that. So yeah.
And did you ever get to go up against your Norwegian counterparts in the F-3?
So we did do some training, but it wasn't memorable. No. I think it was just trying not to embarrass myself or anybody else.
Always a good goal, yeah.
But I think it was more focused about going there for a weekend and then showing, you know, the squadron mates in the UK the scenery and of the Norwegian fjords and everything, and go partying in the local town, which we did. And but it was cool to bring a 4-ship to Norway 2 times and show them, you know, this is what we do and this is, you know, different. But it was always amazed me how the RAF does incredible job with not having maybe the top equipment sometimes, and that was certainly true on the F-34. So the knowledge of the airplane, and also you know, missiles and generically very, very clever guys.
Was there much banter between you and the RAF guys, obviously, being a Norwegian guy?
Yeah, a little bit, but it was, you know, it was always great spirit. You know, I was very welcomed into the squadron, but you know, I could grow a goatee or a beard, and you know, it's, you know, the RAF couldn't, you know, so it's a bit of 2 fingers back sometimes. But you know, the small little things. But we had an amazing time, and I learned a lot, and I think I passed on some good things too as well. Certainly from an air combat point of view, dogfighting. So
I'm going to ask you, I know this one you're probably going to pick, but if you took one into combat, which would you take, the F-3 or the F-16?
Yeah, that's the F-16, of course.
I love my F-3.
Yeah, I know you do. That's not why I said it. Honestly, I have to say my little pink ass. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So overall, did you enjoy your time on the F-16 and the F-3?
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. I couldn't have wished for more. You know, you could, and that, I think it depends on the personality. If you really want to do, you know, 10, 15 years on the F-16 and really get to the deepest of it, and but for me, it was a fantastic way to see both. And I think that also led to, you know, the test pilot job later on. So, but yeah, absolutely enjoyed it.
So how many hours did you actually get on the F-16?
F-16, 1600, something like that. And yeah, short of, I think about 400 on the F-3.
Not bad.